Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. We're going to do something that sounds and even feels a little bit like a weekend edition, because it's year-in edition. We have a round table. Penna, Dexter with me. And of course, Penna, you've been through some of these where we look back over the year and then look ahead to what might be taking place. And so we have posted a couple of very good articles that give you kind of a brief review of what happened in 2018. And then we're going to also look ahead to 2019. And thanks again for joining us right here on the program.
Well, it's fun. And, you know, I was trying to think about it yesterday, and it was getting overwhelming to wrap your arms around it. But I sort of synthesized it down in my mind to one topic: Donald Trump, because everything's really been about him in 2018.
I know. My commentary today is on the top stories of 2018, and I try to divide it a little bit into some of the political things, some of the natural disasters, and a variety of others. But again, we do know how much it does tend to circle around any president, but especially this president. And back from first Thailand and then Tennessee, Nick Pitts.
I am here, and I want you to know that the last man you saw had not ate scorpions, had not pet tigers, had not bathed elephants, had not bungee jumped.
Yes, I saw the
and
bungee
had
jump.
not almost gotten an encounter with the Thai police that will forever change my entire view of law enforcement. But nevertheless, I am here and a new man, one might be able to say.
They turned in their wave runners, and they said they had damaged them, you know. And then it got ugly for a long period of time, didn't it?
It got a little interesting, to say the very least. But nevertheless, we made it out alive. I'm extremely grateful for police officers around the world, and for the opportunity to be able to communicate in English with fellow Americans now. So, but nevertheless, loved my time in Thailand. Chitty Bangkok, loved it.
Yes. Well, Tennessee probably wasn't quite as wild.
Yeah, Tennessee was a little bit different, one might be able to say, than Thailand. They don't serve, at least scorpions aren't served on the streets. But yeah, it was a great time in Tennessee with family, and got back here a couple of days ago.
How do they cook that?
Yeah, so they it's like fried, I guess you would say. And so there's it's just really a heavy seasoning, and it's a crunch, and I am exceedingly grateful that I had a bottle of water right beside me after I consumed my scorpion. So,
yes, and petted his tiger. So he's had lots of stories here. Penna, when we are going to talk about our year in review, of course, it's hard to get some categories, but come back to your category for just a minute, because I thought that's a good one. So often it's about Donald Trump. Even when he isn't trying to make it about him, the news media makes it about him, doesn't it?
Well, the Mueller investigation was going on before this year started. Can you even imagine that?
It's hard to believe.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
And still going on. And still, one commentator, and we'll talk about that later, it was about the 2016 election at the end of last year, and it still is. Amazingly enough.
Yes.
But also just his accomplishments. There have been many positive accomplishments, and, you know, it would be good to highlight some today that people, they aren't on everybody's front burner, because the news media doesn't allow that to happen. They always find the negative in the positive accomplishment. And then, of course, there's plenty for them to critique also.
Yes. Well, again, Nick, when we get to that, we all talk about the blustery personality, is that a nice way to say it, about Donald Trump, and all of the tweets and all of the rest, which so far overshadow some of the things that we try to talk about. And even on Friday, we had Kelly Shackelford kind of going through some of those accomplishments, which you wouldn't know, because even if Donald Trump could pull back a little bit and not say some things, and I don't think that's possible. I think we've now concluded the media still wouldn't cover him, and it's really kind of sad. So that's one of the reasons we talk about some of these issues on Point of View.
So I think that's going to be a fun thing to be able to recount over the next couple of hours, just this idea that there have been so many accomplishments. If you look back over some of the things that his administration has done, I mean, the sheer amount of deregulation that's happened, what's happened relative to ISIS over in Syria and Iraq right now, what's happened with the Supreme Court justices as well as court justices that have been appointed to the court. But nevertheless, we continue to go back to some of the other things like the size of his button and the fact that he's a very stable genius. And these are all his doing. So yes, there is the media component, but there's also his component as well. And for all the successes, we continue to go back to some of these things where we're like, I wish you didn't have a Twitter right now so that this wouldn't happen. But nevertheless, that's where we are. And so we can celebrate.
There's a synergism there because the media is looking for, especially in this world, two of us are older, but you're the young generation, can relate to the fact that you've always known where everything's a 24/7 news operation. And so you're going to lead with whatever might be controversial. And he's certainly willing to give it to them. And they're certainly willing to camp out on those as well.
You know, there was a thought that was put out probably 6 months ago. And I don't know how much I believe it or not, but how much I think that it has to a certain degree been profitable, that he has to a large degree manufactured some of this, and the media has bought into this sensationalism. But then underneath it all, we're seeing so much progress that's being made relative to the shrinking of the government, relative to the deregulation, relative to some of these other successes, that it's almost like the sleight of hand. While everything else is going on, he's been able to do all these major successes relative to deregulation, being one of them.
You know, looking at just a few of them, I mean, one, of course, Nick just mentioned was the Supreme Court pick of Justice Kavanaugh and sticking with him through the battles. I mean, because you could have pulled away. A president could have pulled away and chosen someone else when everything started, but he didn't. He didn't do that. And so I thought that was an accomplishment. And just all the judges that he's picked has been huge for Donald Trump. And then the tax cuts, and then so you've seen middle-class wages rising. You've also seen unemployment at a record low, and minority unemployment in all the categories are low. And then you've had the trade policy, although some people will look at that as a negative, he's actually, the way he does things with his back-and-forth negotiating style, using Twitter, using meetings, he's actually made progress in being tough on China that will probably turn out to be a net positive for the U.S. and for the world. And then moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, I mean, that was huge, and that made certainly his base very happy. Korean diplomacy, although that's not finished, has started. And then standing firm on this wall, holding back the caravans that have come forward, which actually gave him the opportunity, I think, to stand for the wall, which he'd promised during his campaign, and make that an issue, as it still is here at the end of the year. Now, the shutdown could be a mixed bag for people. I'm actually a little bit optimistic about the shutdown this time. I know that he'll be blamed, but in a sense, I think he'll also get some credit for that.
We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more. Let me just mention that, as Nick always mentions, and I have as well, you can watch the program on Facebook Live, but there's also a place where you can leave some comments. So one of the comments I would encourage you to leave at Facebook Live, of course you can call in as well, is what you think are some of the top stories of 2018. And we're going to do our best to try to cover all sorts of different ones over the next couple of hours, but love to hear your comments about that. But back to the point you made just a minute ago, Penna, I saw some video a while back where they were interviewing all these individuals at a Trump rally. What did you appreciate most about him? And the one that surfaced so often was moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which was not exactly the biggest issue for him. But I think it was just that, we've seen 4 other presidents promise to move the embassy, and he actually did it, And now I think the same thing with the wall. I think you may have people saying, even if he took a big hit, he promised it and he did it. That's a very different kind of mindset than the old idea that basically campaign promises are like crusts of bread and things of that nature, meant to be broken. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, as 2018 is winding down, it's worth taking a moment to look back over the year and consider some of the top stories. We often find that stories that start in one year continue to the next. Sometimes new stories in the coming year remind us of stories of the previous year. Of course, 2018 was an election year. Coverage of the congressional campaigns dominated much of the news coverage, especially in the fall. Democrats will take control of the House of Representatives, and we should expect conflict and gridlock this next year. One of the major political events of 2018 was the Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Brett Kavanaugh in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Confirmation hearings are always full of conflict and political theater. This time, conflict reached a new level with the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller continued his investigation that already has cost $25 million. We should get a final report in 2019. Earlier in the year were the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea. The medal winners and the political intrigue made them worth watching each night. And finally, we had a number of natural disasters that destroyed large sections of land and killed so many people. Hurricane Florence devastated the Carolinas and surrounding regions with up to 40 inches of rain, severe flooding, and winds up to 90 miles an hour. More than 40 people died. In November, multiple wildfires burned in both northern and southern California. The Camp Fire was the deadliest American fire in 100 years. It burned over 150,000 acres and killed 85 people. The Woolsey Fire burned over 96,000 acres in Southern California. As 2018 comes to a close, it's worth remembering some of these and other news stories that made this year one to remember. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Don't forget, this is the last day of the year. A little bit later, we're going to talk about what you can do to help us financially. We are still in need of financial support as we end this year, and I'll talk more about some of those numbers in just a minute and encourage your response. But again, Penna, Dexter, and Nick Pitts, Dr. Nick Pitts with us today. We have his daily briefing. We'll get to that in just a few minutes as well. But Penna, you raised a very good question, the wall. There have been, and I even have talked about all the different arguments against the wall. It's too expensive. Oh, my goodness. The most recent federal budget now is $4.1 trillion, $5 billion, as Kelly Shackelford said even last Friday. It's not even a rounding error, so it's not that expensive. It's not effective. Oh, well, I've been to Hungary this year, and I've been to Israel the year before. I can show you very good examples of how walls have been very effective in that country. So then it's xenophobic or something, or it's not popular. Well, speak to that issue, because what we're seeing right now is the press saying, why is he shutting down the government? We're on, the 10th day of the shutdown over something that isn't popular with the American people.
Yeah, every media outlet, I think, that reports on this talks about Trump. You know, this is stupid of him. Well, he's not stupid. He's pretty smart marketing-wise. But the wall's not popular, they will say. But in the same breath, almost, you can hear Republicans support it by 89%. Not just support border security, they support a wall by 89%. So, you know, he's fulfilling a promise to his base. He's pleasing his base. That's supposedly not smart. You're supposed to compromise in the eyes of the media, which means the left wins. And so, I don't know, I just think it's so refreshing, especially since we've just celebrated the homegoing of George H.W. Bush, who was a one-term president. I mean, everybody was, very complimentary of him after his death, but he was a one-term president because he broke a big promise, probably his biggest promise to his base, which was no new taxes. He broke it, and he lost. And so this president is keeping his promise. This was his signature campaign issue. It could have been the issue that catapulted him into the White House. Why not stick with your guns?
Yeah, if we've seen anything from this president, it's that he's transactional to the very core. He knows what it takes to scratch individuals' backs of constituencies, and as long as those individuals and constituencies will scratch his back, he will come out in droves. They'll come out in droves for support of him. I know that we can speculate and we can analyze this whole 81% of evangelicals that voted for him, and there's so many in the country that are wondering why in the world would 81% support this president. But then when you look at what he's done for religious liberty, you look what he's done on the Supreme Court, you look what he's done in the lower courts, you look what he's done with Israel. There's countless reasons that evangelicals can point to say this is the reason why we supported our president. You can continue to think whether he's a Christian or not. He says that he is. We can trust. Well, I guess we can trust what he says. But at the end of the day, we might not know whether he's a Christian, but we can for sure know that he's championed Christian causes, and because of that, that 81% becomes ever more clear.
A lot of people have even said, even Kelly Shackelford sometimes will say, I'm not sure he always believes all of this about these judges, but he knows that his base believes it. Mm-hmm. And so that may be enough, but I think he does. But when you come to the wall, Penna, he brought that up so many times, even in times when it wasn't even necessary to have talked about it. I think at his core, he honestly believes that you need a wall. And this last Twitter account post, a tweet, I guess we should call it, said, well, Barack Obama, he put a wall around his house. If it's good enough for the former president, it's good enough for the American people.
Remember during the campaign, he kept saying, if you don't have a border, you don't have a country.
Yeah.
I used to think that was a sort of a strange thing to say, and then it started dawning on me. It was very wise. And, the caravans that have come during his presidency have made the need for a wall much more clear. I mean, when you have these dramatic numbers of people and the people that we have to take to the border to keep control of this, to keep that invasion from really coming into our country. And there's one other point on this, and we talk about it costing $5 billion. What about the cost of all the people that end up in our country? Most of them are in need of government largesse.
Well, once they become citizens, they become productive members. But if they're on the periphery, first of all, they're not governed by any kind of OSHA regulations. Right. If they have false Social Security cards, then they're defrauding things. I mean, we need to get them out of the shadows, and we need to have some control over our borders, and we need to deal with the people that are overstaying their visas. These are all very complex issues.
And especially here in Texas, and for our Texas audience, I think many of our listeners can probably resonate with the fact that we're just dealing with it. I mean, Governor Abbott came out, was a couple of days ago, and talked about how our state is paying upwards of $1 billion to be able to keep up, to be able to man the border right now. And that's not a state thing. That's one of the federal responsibilities, to be able to protect them. Like, that's a federal responsibility. Yeah, states should pay in, but at the end of the day, this is a federal responsibility that's not being heeded right now. The president is doing what he can to be able to establish that. I still, there's still that point of me that does wonder about the efficiency and the effectiveness of a wall. I am of the mind. Will Hurd has been someone, and we've talked about this on Wednesdays.
I've been trying to get him on so he can explain that.
I am captivated by this idea of a smart wall. Maybe it's because I'm just such a technological geek right now, but the idea of being able to utilize the best of our technology that's coming out of Silicon Valley to be able to track individuals when they cross this wall. I'm not against a physical wall, but I just think that I just wonder if this smart wall technology, the cost efficiency that it brings, of the ability to be able to track individuals that cross, of the ability to be able to not only capture and identify those individuals, but then to keep account of them if they continue to come across. That type of technology piques my interest, and I think is a conversation worth exploring around the larger conversation of a wall and around the greater conversation of immigration policy, because a wall is simply just one component of the immigration problem that has got to be solved right now. There are hundreds of thousands of individuals that are waiting for their immigration courts right now, and that's a whole other problem that we still haven't been able to solve that needs to be rectified. rectified.
Yes. Well, and again, I think that's another aspect of that, because there's certain places where it's obvious we're never going to have a wall. 1,700 miles? Of course not. But you've lived in San Diego, and you look at that entry in San Ysidro and some places like that. But now we're having a semantic debate. Is it a wall or is it a fence? Well, it's actually got slats, which I think makes some sense, because then you can see through what's going on the other side. So that's fine. But to use my example, last year about this time, I guess it was in January, I went to Hungary, and the president of Hungary is a lot like Donald Trump. And so a number of years ago, when we had all of these individuals, supposedly Syrian refugees, turns out some of them turned out to be terrorists, were coming through Hungary, they built a wall on the Serbian side of the Hungarian border. It's 4 meters high, so it's about 12 feet high, not quite as high as the one there. Guess what? Stopped it instantaneously, but then they started coming around through Croatia. They built another wall there, and in a sense just moved them on. And there's a sense in which, if you recognize that in certain places where people are going to be engaged in foot traffic, that's the case. But I wholly agree that in other places, drones and smart walls are going to have to be the way we protect our border in some of those desolate areas in Arizona and especially in Texas.
I think that people use the fact that this would not be one contiguous wall all the way across the border. They use that as an argument against the wall. And, it's not an argument against the wall. Just start building the wall. Find the most strategic places to get the wall up, and, we'll deal with the rest later. Yeah.
El Paso, San Ysidro, a few places like that. And back to the point that Nick made, I was noticing the other day that USA Today was arguing against the wall. And again, same arguments. Too expensive, not effective. Here was another one. Well, 40% of the individuals are here illegally, overstay their visa. Well, I agree with that, you know, and we've talked about that. How many times? I mean, since Marco Rubio brought that up almost a decade ago on this program, we've been talking about that. So every aspect of immigration policy needs to be addressed. And so let's just deal with each one sequentially, because Penna and I are really against this idea of a comprehensive immigration policy.
It's a part of a larger conversation. A wall needs to be a part of that conversation because, again, not only is it beneficial for the American populace when the rule of law is heeded from an economic standpoint, from a humanistic standpoint, that we have to be able to control our borders. We're a sovereign country. That should be an easy thing, and a wall needs to be a part of that. The second part of that needs to be, we need to address why we have so few judges. It's like 400 judges that are dealing with these immigration court cases for these asylum cases that are put forward. There's over 700,000 at last count that are backlogged right now. And when they're backlogged right now, what are they doing? They're just roaming our country. We have very little information as to where.
Or they're dying in the refugee camps.
Yes.
Kids
or they're being released into these city parks. That's what Representative O'Rourke was talking. There's so many issues that need to be a part of this, and issues that need to be addressed. The wall should be one thing of a lot of things that we need to be addressing right now. Because again, at the end of the day, it's not lacking compassion when we try to protect our borders, but rather it's showing compassion in such a way that benefits not only the people that are in the country, but also the people that are outside the country as well.
I think just having a wall and getting going on that shows the seriousness of the issue, that our government is actually taking it seriously, and perhaps it will become less of a political football then.
Yeah, as I say, if you have a water leak in your home, what's the first thing you do? You turn off the water, then you mop it. But you don't try to mop it while you got water running. It doesn't make any sense. Let's take a break. We got a lot more to cover right after this.
Once upon a time, a banker made an offer. For every mortgage payment you make today, we will credit your account for 2. If you received that offer, would you make a payment? I know I would. I'd find a way to make more than 1. Opportunities that good don't come along often, and you need to jump on them when they do. Like most stories that begin once upon a time, that one never happened. But I do know of a real opportunity to double your investment when you give today. You care about this country. You try to love your neighbors. And when you invest in Point of View Radio today, you help bring about the kind of changes you want to see in this land. And thanks to an offer not from a banker, but from special friends of Point of View, your investment today, whatever you can do, will be doubled. But you must give today. Invest online at pointofview.net or by phone, 800-347-5151. The opportunity is here. Make your next bold move right now. Pointofview.net, and 800-347-5151. Give today. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Year in review, and if you would like to join the conversation, that number is 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Dr. Nick Pitts in studio. Of course, you can also watch or leave a comment on Facebook Live, and we'll get to those in just a minute. Let me also mention, and I'll spend more time talking about this at the top of the hour, that we are coming to the very last day. This is our year end. And I just checked a few minutes ago, and in order to meet our goal, we still need about $73,000. And, of course, as I've mentioned before, we have a matching fund of $65,000. So if I've done the math right, it still means that if you send in a gift of $100, it becomes $200. A gift of $500 becomes $1,000. You can do that by going to the website, pointofview.net, and clicking on the banner. And we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But also, of course, you can use the calling in line or else the on-air line. We'll just transfer you over. But the easiest one, if you wanted to make a pledge right now, that's 800-347-5151, which is a different number than the on-air line. But any way you can, we would certainly encourage you to take some action. And Penna, you know how we all wait to the last moment, although I will give my wife credit. We've already sent out all the checks, but she did give me one more today. This one actually is for Dallas Baptist University, which I just put in the mail.
Hey, I like it.
Which was a significant one, but everything else put in the mail were just bills. So if you are the ones that procrastinate, and we try not to procrastinate, but I do know some of our Point of View listeners do procrastinate. It's the last day. It's the last few hours before, if you want to get credit on your taxes for 2018, this is the time to send in your gift right now.
Yeah, sometimes we don't necessarily think about our financial picture until the very end of the year.
Yes.
And, it's important. A lot of people, this is a great opportunity to help a ministry that's doing great good and inform your fellow citizens of America and also get your tax picture in a little better shape. And I love that we can also just make our donations online and make it this year. Even today, it will actually be received by us.
I'm an old guy, so, on Friday I was holding up my envelope for First Liberty, and I was going to mail it, and Kelly said, "Oh, just hand it to me," so I gave it to him. Yeah. But some of you younger ones, we got our millennial around the table, you just use the online, right? You don't even know what a checkbook is, right?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll be that guy. I'll be honest, I don't have checks right now. I know I need to have checks. That's been something I've been putting off, reordering those, but, it's been 6 months since I had them. I'm figuring I haven't been able to operate.
Penna can't even imagine
I
that.
can because I have 3 kids in your age category.
I don't.
She
use
used to work
checks.
at a bank, so she knows about checks.
I am. I don't use checks much, but I am so grateful for technology and God's hand and helping people like me have auto reminders and auto pays on some of these things.
That's so
because
good.
I'm a big picture guy, but one of the things that
You ought to be
with
teaching us. It's quick and efficient. It's really a good way to give.
Exactly. One of the
We
things
need
that I
Nick.
realized with the big picture is that life is short, and I want to think about what are the most important things. And while checks are important and paying your bills is extremely important, that's one of the things I appreciate about Point of View, to circle it all the way back. It gives me a big picture understanding of what really matters. Because if you're paying attention to the media right now, if you're paying attention to certain things, they offer you minutia, they offer you just pedantic things that don't really matter. It doesn't really matter how big a button President Trump has. It doesn't really matter how where President Trump is. If he's at the White House right now, or if he's in the executive office building, they're making much of this right now. But at the end of the day, what is it? How can we distill that information, and why does it matter, and what matters about it? And that's one of the things that I think Point of View does really well. It helps us to be able to understand not everything that we can know, but everything that we need to know from a trusted voice. And that's why I'm exceedingly grateful.
I think something else about this is that our listeners have tended over the years to be activists. They want to make
Very
a
much
difference.
so.
Some have
Yeah.
more time and ability to be active than others, but we help them to do that because, first of all, you need information. You need to understand what needs to be done, what's important, what are the priorities, what are the biblical foundations of how we would act. And then we even have tools now on our website that help people to take action very easily. And, we just know so many people that have testified to us over the years, really a couple generations of people now since Marlon Maddox started this show, that will say, I was inspired to get involved in the culture because of Point of View. And so, that is still the case. Amazingly, God has kept this ministry going all these years, and it's because of our listeners and those gifts. So, today is a good day to just help us for this year. Another thing we do is we plan for the future based on what we've, where we stand at the end of the year.
Well, we certainly do. And I'm looking forward to later this week. Interestingly enough, we'll be in 2019. We had Abby Johnson on just the other day. We talked about the actress that plays her in the upcoming film Unplanned. And so we'll have her on, and even my commentary coming out. So we already have plans for 2019 that involved guests, but we also have plans that involve various financial activities, some of which Nick's been very much involved with as well. So we'll be rolling some of that out in the next hour or so. But just before we run out of time in this segment, let's, if we can, talk about the shutdown. And one of the surprises that I came across the other day is a number of people in the White House are even suggesting that the shutdown may continue until Donald Trump gives his State of the Union address. And in case you're not familiar, that happens January 22nd. So this is not going to last days. This could last weeks.
I think that's one of the things that's so interesting. Again, there's not usually a lot that happens this time of year. Most people are out right now, and so that's like to be expected. But one of the things that we're not seeing right now is there is just a sense of there's no deal making that's being done right now. There's no what are the compromising, what are the pieces, what are the components of the big pieces of information that we're looking to give and get. We're not seeing any of that right now. And so all we've seen is this $5 billion number for border wall security. And then the only new information that we've received over the past 4 or 5 days that's kind of percolated out of this has been former chief of staff John Kelly yesterday started sharing how it's not really a border wall and it goes towards border security. But other than that, we've just seen two parties that have been very locked down on one party that's been locked down on what they want, where you have Republicans are very solidified around this $5 billion for a wall. But then you've got Democrats that, I mean, really, they've kind of thrown around the $1.4 billion number for border security, which is a lot bigger than the border wall, and then the $1.6 trillion number, or $1.6 billion number. But again, we haven't seen really a lot of movement. It makes you think, like, what's about to happen?
You know, again, I last week talked a little bit about Mike Pence had offered a compromise to Chuck Schumer, and he got zero response. And then now today we see Senator Lindsey Graham coming up with some compromise. Yeah. But again, you don't hear anything on the other side. And somewhere along the line, you do need a compromise, because I don't think you're going to get 5.7, and I don't think you're going to get 1.3. So somewhere along the line, something has to give. But when nobody's at the table talking, this could last a while, don't you think?
Yeah,
Penna?
I think Nancy Pelosi will hold a vote when she takes power. But as far as the Senate goes, you haven't heard word one from Mitch McConnell during the Christmas season. So I don't know what's going to happen there. It is going to be interesting to see. But to me, it's refreshing that there has been no movement. I'd rather see it just kind of sit here like this for a little while, so that people can just start to think about the repercussions of this.
Yeah, I think that will be interesting to see what actually are some of the ramifications that happens. Like, so right now we're seeing very little, just because it's the time of the year where individuals just largely aren't paying attention to DC. One, they're with family, they're with their friends, they're doing other things. But then I think we're going to start seeing some of those implications, because we're going to start seeing, one, there's going to be a slowdown at the passport office to get passports processed. Two, you're going to start to see museums that are going to get closed, i.e. the Smithsonian that's already been closed. Three, you're going to start to see some of these national parks shut down, which again are going to be some of those ramifications that people are going to start seeing. And then just the sheer size of the government workforce. I mean, it's over 2 million people right now. So that's a large number of people that will. If the past is any indication, they will get paid. They'll just get paid a delayed payment, but they'll start going without paychecks during a certain time. And when you have 41% of the American population that can't afford a $400 emergency thing, we're going to start seeing some of those implications play out as well. So we'll see if any of that begins to put pressure on our leaders to be able to start working towards a solution.
And again, we talked about the other day that there were already stories of some individuals that were like in Homeland Security or Agriculture or other departments that were closed down, said they had to take their Christmas gifts back. Well, you know, right now that's not, registering with people, and you're now starting to say, some of them saying, I got a baby at home and I can't go to the grocery store, you know, and all those kinds of questions that are going to surface. And as Nick points out, 2 million, but if you add up everybody, military, civilian, contractors, 4.8 million, and a budget of $4 trillion. And so, again, first of all, this is a huge organization called the federal government. And I've even used the illustration that if you take the two largest corporations right now that we have, the two Fortune 500 ones, and that would be Walmart and Amazon, in both cases, they wouldn't even be the second largest government programs because the government is so large. So sooner or later, there's going to be a lot of pressure put on the president and on Congress. But at the moment, as you said, nobody's paying attention. We'll come back and talk about a freeze on income right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Ben Franklin reportedly said, "There is nothing certain in life except for death and taxes." Well, in a 548-page complaint, one man has targeted at least one of those certainties, and it's not death. Terry Lee Hines contends that the United States tax code has violated the Constitution by establishing taxism and institutionalized faith and religion. Because the tax code has the effect of favoring and even promoting organized religions through tax breaks and other benefits, Mr. Hines believes the tax code is in violation of the First Amendment. Well, I suppose this is the sort of case that law students are forced to grapple with, but actually have little effect in the real world. Some may dream that such a lawsuit is the silver bullet to bring down our ghoulish tax system. Alas, Mr. Hines' lawsuit will not free us from the taxman's visit every April 15. For one reason, taxpayers have a lot of hurdles to overcome just to bring the lawsuit. Mere allegations, even ones dressed up in the garb of a First Amendment challenge, that they do not like to pay taxes will not be sufficient. For now, Mr. Hines and the rest of us will have to continue to pay our taxes, and most importantly, the religious charities and houses of worship that are exempt from them will continue to be exempt. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. You can protect your religious freedom by going to firstliberty.org to download your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit. Our attorneys created kits for churches, ministries, Christian schools, military members, students, and teachers, and the workplace. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Year in review. Penna, Dexter, Nick Pitts. Shouldn't try to speak quite so quickly. And we have a lot to cover, but one of the things I thought we might cover, Nick, is just the fact that as people go to the daily briefing, your lead article, Trump orders pay freeze for federal workers. Now, that's not unexpected. As a matter of fact, a while back, he asked each one of the cabinet officers to see if they could cut their budget by 5%. And if we're ever going to get to a point where we're not just putting more and more financial burden on your generation and the next generation with this national debt and the whole issue of the federal deficit each year, I guess that's one thing. And again, this order comes as about 800,000 federal workers are out of the workforce at the moment because they're sitting home.
Yeah, so the only thing bigger than the government shutdown is the almost 15-pound baby that was born in Arlington, Texas. And
Where? How do you even do that?
It caused great appreciation for me to, one, recognize the women in my life that have to put up with that. But it does bring up an interesting point of this is a very big situation right now where you have the idea of and just to be very honest, I've got some great friends that work in the government that I know that they work hard, and if they're taking pay cuts right now because they're working in the government, because if they were working in the private sector, they would be making quite a bit more than what they're making in the government right now. But they feel the need to be public servants, and that happens to put them in places like the VA and the IRS. And in a shocking twist, I can have sympathy for an IRS agent because he just happens to be a good friend of mine. Yeah. But nevertheless, it does bring up a really good point as to what are the rationales, what are the explanations behind the reasons why we would, one, not give them annual pay raises, which many of our listeners can probably resonate with the fact that they get annual cost of living pay raises every year. And so why would the government be any different with that? And then there's the other component of which we're all kind of familiar with, which is just kind of common parlance. There's just some pretty great inefficiencies in the government right now. And once you get hired by the government, it's really hard to get fired by the government. And so you see instances like there was a California individual that was a California government worker that was caught watching promiscuous behavior on his computer for upwards of 6 hours a day. And he still wasn't fired because of that. Then there's another instance of a individual at the DMV in California that was sleeping at her desk for upwards of 3 hours every day. And you're like, well, and she's on. And so there's certain inefficiencies that, like, of course you don't deserve a pay raise. When you're doing that type of behavior, that's unbecoming. That's not worthy of a pay raise. But then there's the other side where you have an individual, a Sacramento postal worker that rescued a girl out of sex trafficking, while he was just doing his job. And so there are other instances, outlier instances, one might be able to say, as to why they deserve a pay raise. Well, again, these are outlier instances, but I do think it's worthy of conversation because, again, this isn't just a President Trump issue. This has happened on both Democrats and Republican side. And I think you do bring up a really great point that we have to keep into consideration is the fact that our deficit just continues, this debt burden that we have just continues to just bludgeon and be so huge. And eventually the roosters will come home one day.
And I might just mention you can read all the story about even the 15-pound baby, as well as the California DMV worker and a variety of others on the daily briefing, which we have linked there. It's number 6. So everything he just said in written form exists if you actually get the daily briefing, and you can subscribe to the daily briefing, right?
Yeah, you can go to thebriefing.net and subscribe. And so it's...
the pay freeze, it's sort of a Trump-esque move, I think, because he is a businessman.
Oh, yeah.
And when, businesses have to look at the bottom line, they can't spend more than they're bringing in, or if they have to borrow money. And so this president, I think it's sort of a tactic in a sense to get things moving.
Right.
I mean, we have worried. I mean, there's this tax cut that passed. It's been a great thing for the country, but we have to look at the other side of the ledger, the spending.
Oh, yeah.
And we haven't really addressed that enough. So I think it's like a shot across the bow on the part of the president. Well, if I can't keep my own house in order spending-wise, then, how can I talk about that for all the states and localities across the country? And so I think, in a sense, that's, he does things like that. Yeah. He does big things, and then they get a little bit more reasonable after a while.
Yeah, it's like any. So we're going to channel Calvin Coolidge, right? He was probably the last Republican that really did this. It's the idea of, yes, we need to control our spending, but also we need to re-examine the current spending levels that we have. And what's happened since Coolidge is we've either done one or the other. We haven't done both. And I think both are worthy of consideration, especially when you consider how big our government has become right now. There are some really great functions that are constitutionally outlined that we should continue to fund, that we should continue to do. Namely, we need to continue to fund border security. Namely, we need to continue to have a presence relative to kind of some of our protecting our borders, but also kind of foreign affairs kind of operations. But I think one of the things that we do need to consider are some of these ancillary services that aren't outlined in the Constitution right now. And I think that where a lot of that information is getting shown right now, and some of the greatest work that's happening, I would argue, is happening in the administrative state with deregulation, I should say, pulling away some of these things in order that the American populace can function like the American populace, which is this art of associating, coming together in order to make the country rich by making it local.
The argument I make, and I even do this in a commentary coming up, is that, when you are talking about a budget of $4.1 trillion, and if you add everybody that is in one way or another associated to the federal government, even contractors, 4.8 million employees, right? You don't have anything like that. Nobody in the history of mankind, no one in history has ever had to manage something that huge. Now, some people say, well, Donald Trump, he had a large organization. That pales in comparison to the size of the federal government. And the previous president, He'd never managed anything. His expertise before he became president was he was a rookie senator. Today, Elizabeth Warren put out her video that she's now going to form an exploratory committee. And again, Elizabeth Warren, who has been a professor at Harvard and a Massachusetts senator, is going to control something this large. I mean, somewhere along the line, we just need to say, Penna, government has gotten too big, too messy, too inefficient. And when you have a quarter of the government shut down, quote, at the moment, and we send home non-essential personnel, some people, I can understand why they say, why don't we just leave the non-essential home?
Yeah, it has to be moved around. I mean, we don't want to
Yes.
forego, for instance, the national
No,
parks
of course not.
that Nick brought up. I mean, we don't want to say, okay, the national parks should not be funded by the government. Well, that's crazy. But those are the non-essentials that have been deemed worthy of being part of this cut right now, and they're part of the government that has not been funded. To its credit, this time Congress did pass some of its funding bills early on. It wasn't the whole government left at the end of the year to fund. But, I do think there has to be some thought. And President Trump did try to get all the departments to make cuts. And it hasn't really, I don't think it's really happened yet. We need an update on that. But I think, we need some research on that. And really, there does need to be a lot of cutting in the government. I mean, think about the area around Washington, D.C. It's one of the wealthiest. It is like the wealthiest area in
Fairfax
the country.
County and Montgomery County, two of the wealthiest counties in the country. Yeah. Well, we need to take a break. That's the first issue we need to put on the table. And while we do so, just let me mention again that we are coming to year end. And if you have been thinking about supporting this ministry, we really encourage you to do so. Again, you can leave some comments on Facebook right now. We've got comments from Winnipeg, Canada, and from Corpus Christi, to mention just a few. So that is, again, some of you listening to the program. But as you go to our website, pointofview.net, you'll see a banner there right now. $65,000 matching fund that's still in operation, which means if you click on that button, your gift of $100 becomes $200. A gift of $200 becomes $400. So we are coming to year end. If you've been waiting till the last few hours, that's where we are right now. So we need to hear from you. Visit the website, pointofview.net, or you can even talk to someone right now, 800-347-5151. That's our pledge line. We'll be right back.
Once upon a time, a banker made an offer. For every mortgage payment you make today, we will credit your account for 2. If you received that offer, would you make a payment? I know I would. I'd find a way to make more than one. Opportunities that good don't come along often, and you need to jump on them when they do. Like most stories that begin once upon a time, that one never happened. But I do know of a real opportunity to double your investment when you give today. You care about this country. You try to love your neighbors. And when you invest in Point of View Radio today, you help bring about the kind of changes you want to see in this land. And thanks to an offer not from a banker, but from special friends of Point of View, your investment today, whatever you can do, will be doubled. But you must give today. Invest online at pointofview.net or by phone, 800-347-5151. The opportunity is here. Make your next bold move right now. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Give today. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the end of the year, so we're going to do kind of a year in review and look at some very important issues that transpired over 2018 and look ahead to 2019. And we also have posted a couple of articles that I think you're going to find very helpful. And most importantly, before the end of the program, we do want to encourage you, if you have not given to Point of View, to consider what you might do to join with us. And we have a banner there which says, "Make your move, give boldly," a matching grant, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. Round the round table, it's going to feel like a weekend edition, but it's a year in review, and that's with Penna, Dexter. And Penna, it's just always great to focus on some of these important stories, and when you look over all these stories, we got a lot to cover in the next 2 hours.
We do. We have some inspiring stories. I mean, I think of the story of the soccer team, for instance, in Thailand that was rescued by Navy SEALs from the cave. I mean, that is so inspiring.
Yes.
And then there are some shootings, and, you know, what did we learn from that? Especially the Parkland shooting. There are some educational policy changes that have been actually made by this government because of that shooting. So we learned something. We can talk about that. I think a big theme that we're seeing, this is to me a very unfortunate theme, internationally, but in the U.S., is the rise of socialist ideas and how they're taking hold to some degree. And, you know, this show has been around so long that we've watched different trends, but we've had some decades where conservative ideas have been very popular. And you had to run, especially in the Republican Party, as a conservative, even if you weren't. And now it's becoming cool to be socialist in the Democrat Party. And some of these ideas are not so out there as they were in the last 10 years. So I think that's something we're going to have to be watching.
And again, a Penna Dexter commentary on that. Of course, we did have a political year. We had a Supreme Court nominee and a number of other things. Dr. Nick Pitt's with us as well, and my goodness.
I blame this all on the Laurel and Yanny controversy of 2018.
Yes,
the socialist ideas were because individuals heard Yanni or Yanny instead of hearing Laurel. It was very clear. Andrew, I don't know if we could pull that up, but I think we probably need to pull that up again, because there are some individuals that have been swayed by the evil one to believe it was Yanny or Yanni or whatever you want to call it. But nevertheless, I blame it all on that.
I might just mention, too, that we've posted a couple articles on 2018 in review. Also, our friends at World Magazine, some of their top articles. But I put this in for Nick Pitts. Dave Barry's year in review. You got to love Dave Barry anyway. And then I also have listed here the daily briefing. So if you don't have a chance to read what I think is one of the grossest elements by Dave Barry in his year review, you can read it on the daily briefing. But you are such a comedian.
You know, I just it's I don't know if our listeners listen or have read Dave Barry before or kind of follow along
what
with
an
him.
incredibly gifted comedian.
He is such a great writer. Like I said, he's a columnist out of Florida, and so every year he posts this year in review for I don't know how many years, but he has such a way of being able to curate the news news and puts a comedic spin on it, and then helps. And it kind of goes back to Soren Kierkegaard. We live life moving forward. We understand life looking back, and like he just helps us to be able to see these big alarming things that happened in the past year. Just the kind of the less how little significance they actually hold, and then he does it in such a way that's just, I mean, it's so funny. So probably one of the funniest lines. And again, I would argue this is one of the biggest stories that happened this year. But I'll just read like one little 2 sentences. He says, "Meanwhile, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy announces his decision to retire, creating an important opportunity for the nation's political leaders to demonstrate that, although the public might have a low opinion of them as a group, it's nowhere near low enough." There's just it's like a probably 3,000 word column. It's just littered with these little puns and these little lines that are just so rich. And so we'll go over these, and because again, if I had to look back at the past year, I would say the mass violence instances that happened definitely captivated our attention and shaped us in new ways, especially highlighting particular issues like the Second Amendment. The Kavanaugh hearings were something that galvanized us significantly. And then I would say that even though I joked about it, it's the Laurel Yanni, the rise of this trivial information that has an ability to be, one, to be able to captivate us in a new and a fresh ways, but two, kind of reveals kind of some of the divisiveness that's a part of us, even though it might be playfulness about it.
Well, and again, I might just mention, if you go to our website, pointofview.net, we have a link to, of course, the daily briefing. And number 3 is Dave Barry's Year in Review. And you can learn about the doctor that has a cable reality show. Maybe we'll get to that a little bit later, which is one of the grossest things I think I've ever heard in my life. So I won't say it all, at least as we start out of the box here. We may get to it before it's all through. But Penna, this has just been a busy year. And if nothing else, we oftentimes say that past is prologue for the future. So some people say, well, as you're looking back to 2018, it's in my rearview mirror. Yeah, but we can learn some lessons and even see some trends that are going to play out in the next couple of months, aren't they?
Yeah, we can see that. I think one of the lessons, or actually a trend that we almost can't do a whole lot about, because you have to let it run its course in a sense, and that's two movements: the Me Too movement,
yes,
and the transgender movement, because both of those are driving decision making in government, in local, state government, in private businesses. They've both been, in a sense, weaponized. I mean, Nick mentioned the Kavanaugh nomination, and certainly that was the fact that Christine Blasey Ford was listened to and taken so seriously when she had no corroboration of her accusations was because of the Me Too movement. It was because you can't let a woman's thinking about what happened to her, you can't dismiss that. I mean, you just can't. And so, in a sense, truth holds a back seat to both of these. And, biological, physical truth under the transgender weaponization is it's taking a back seat now to, protecting the dignity and rights of a person who thinks they're the opposite sex. So these are big trends that, I think that the transgender movement, because it's anti-biology, may peter out over, I don't know how long. But the Me Too movement is doing a lot of, it's good. There's a lot of good things about it, but it's also doing a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's giving visibility to people like Jordan Peterson, for example, and that you never really anticipated. But Nick, as the younger one around the table, the older ones here would have to say, I never anticipated that somebody would be fired from their job because they didn't use the right pronoun with a transgender person in a classroom.
Yeah, it really is becoming extremely interesting. And I always relate, and I don't want to say I always relate, I think there are comparisons and lines that can be drawn to, in an interesting twist, the Hunger Games. And so if you've seen the Hunger Games, you know that in the Capital District, there's just this extravagance that characterizes the individuals there, just because of the opulence and the prosperity that happens. And it's become increasingly clear here in the U.S. we are experiencing a record level of prosperity that we've never experienced before. And if you look at it's not Bloom's taxonomy. I don't know why I'm blanking right now, but if you look at kind of our self-actualization now, this ability that even though we've got these base needs that are being met, it's allowing us to experiment with certain central things that we believe to actualize us, like our gender, like our orientation, which I think is just another conversation conversation we'll have to pick up after the break.
Well, we will do so. Matter of fact, Nick's going to be sitting here on Wednesday when we do our Millennial Roundtable, but at the moment I'm at the helm, so we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, as 2018 is winding down, it's worth taking a moment to look back over the year and consider some of the top stories. We often find that stories that start in one year continue to the next. Sometimes new stories in the coming year remind us of stories of the previous year. Of course, 2018 was an election year. Coverage of the congressional campaigns dominated much of the news coverage, especially in the fall. Democrats will take control of the House of Representatives, and we should expect conflict and gridlock this next year. One of the major political events of 2018 was the Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Brett Kavanaugh in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Confirmation hearings are always full of conflict and political theater. This time, conflict reached a new level with the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller continued his investigation that already has cost $25 million. We should get a final report in 2019. Earlier in the year were the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea. The medal winners and the political intrigue made them worth watching each night. And finally, we had a number of natural disasters that destroyed large sections of land and killed so many people. Hurricane Florence devastated the Carolinas and surrounding regions with up to 40 inches of rain, severe flooding, and winds up to 90 miles an hour. More than 40 people died. In November, multiple wildfires burned in both northern and southern California. The Camp Fire was the deadliest American fire in 100 years. It burned over 150,000 acres and killed 85 people. The Woolsey Fire burned over 96,000 acres in Southern California. As 2018 comes to a close, it's worth remembering some of these and other news stories that made this year one to remember. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, and if you would like to join our conversation, by the way, 1-800-351-1212. Also, if you would like to maybe leave a note, we've been asking some of you to suggest what you think are some of the top stories of 2018. We do broadcast on Facebook Live. Got some great comments from a number of you wishing us Happy New Year, and we'll continue to look at those as well.
People need to get on Facebook right now. I'm looking directly, Steve, is it on me? I'm looking directly at our Facebook crew right now, and we need to get on Facebook, facebook.com/Point of View Radio. You'll see the live video box. I promise you, my face will not be there for a very long time because I know it's been known to scare children. But when we shift it away from my face, then you can see right underneath the live video box, you can put a question, comment, or what you think is the top story. Honestly, I think it's Laurel and Yanni, but we'd love to hear from you as well. www.facebook.com/Point of View Radio.
I'm losing control, but that's okay.
Or if you want to be old school, give us a call at 800-351-1212.
Don't you know, every one of them around the table here has sat in this chair, and so I'm quite content to have both of them sit there. Matter of fact, Penna has sat here before. You're going to sit here on Wednesday the Millennial Roundtable. What a novelty, a Millennial Roundtable with some millennials.
With some conservative millennials.
What can
Brilliant
I say?
conservatives.
Here we go. It should be fun.
Yes.
Hey, I hear a lot about that, by the way. Just people who are fans of Point of View that are more in my generation who really love the the millennial roundtable.
Yeah, I'm grateful that my return on investment. So all these people that I've paid that are finally saying some good things about it. No,
these people are not people that you have paid. Believe me.
We're so fun. We're just grateful. One, just because the legacy of Point of View, we're so just so overwhelmed by what has been done in the past, and hopefully trying to be half the people to be able to continue it on in the future, to be able to offer a nuanced perspective of the news to help individuals understand what needs to be known, not necessarily everything that can be known. And then two, how do we understand it from both sides, and then from the Christian perspective, because one of the things that Christians are known for their love. And so what we want to do is love is look at the best of the argument, and then hopefully we know that truth wins out. More often than not, the truth wins out on the conservative side. So we want to offer up both perspectives. So grateful for it, and I hope you will make efforts, especially my millennial friends. Will go to pointofview.net, and you can click on the donate now button, and your efforts right now, they can be matched right now, right, Kerby?
Yes, they can. We have a $65,000 matching fund, and I might as well mention that the last time I checked, we are getting closer to our goal. I think we still need about $73,000, and that number is probably high now since we have had some gifts come in, so I'll let you know where we stand on that. And Nick, I do want to thank you for sitting here. Of course, we can't thank Penna enough for the fact that now, I hate to admit it, for both of us, we've been around for decades doing this program, but it's nice to have your enthusiasm, your incredible ability to pull quotes out of thin air and all sorts of facts and figures and statistics, and you have added so much to the program.
It's a whole lot of fun. I'm grateful that y'all lowered the bar enough to let a Tennessean like me on. Unfortunately, I'm not wearing socks, so I can't say that I'm wearing socks and shoes today, but I am here, and so I am grateful to be here, to say the least.
We were talking just a minute ago before I take a phone call, because we do have some calls, 1-800-351-1212, but you were mentioning something, and we can give credit to Abraham Maslow.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
Yes.
And that is the fact that sometimes when you meet the lower level needs, food, clothing, shelter, even significance, after a while, people can do anything. And right now we have the median family income for Americans is the highest in history when adjusted for inflation. We just last month, and that would be in the month of October, for the first month of our fiscal year, because the fiscal year for the federal government goes from October 1st to September 30th, have the greatest amount of tax revenue ever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the tax rates went down and the tax revenue went up. Ooh, who would have guessed? You know, and it set a record. So we are in a time of affluence. And I recognize some of our listeners are saying, well, I haven't seen it in my paycheck yet. But still, as a country, we're very affluent. We're the most affluent country in the world. And so in some respects, we get to be a little bit crazy in terms of some of the things we buy into.
Yeah, so Abraham Maslow came up with this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he says that once our basic survival needs are met, we can indulge in certain luxuries. And I was just reading this actually yesterday. I don't know if our listeners have heard of the book by Tara Westover, her book Educated. Phenomenal read. Highly recommend it. But one of the things that she talks about in her story is that she was never able to be curious about certain subjects because she never had that luxury of it, because she had to fight for food. She had to fight for survival with her family and some other extenuating factors growing up in her kind of area of Idaho. And so she channeled Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so to get back to our point relative to the transgender movement right now, I think one of the interesting things that we find ourselves with, and we just happen to see coincidentally that the transgender movement is giving rise in this very prosperous, very affluent, very opulent time in our country's history right now, because it's allowing individuals to know that some of these basic needs are being met right now. We've got our survival needs, we've got our shelter needs, we've got our food needs that are being met. And at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's in a pyramid form. At the top of it is the self-actualization. Who am I supposed to be? What's my purpose? Those are higher needs that we often don't contemplate when we don't know where our next meal is going to be. So when individuals know all these next meals, where they're coming from, whether it's Chipotle, whether it's McDonald's, or whether they're actually cooking from home, they're able to try to figure out this self-actualization. And what we're finding is that there is a portion, it's not a significant portion because it's only around 700,000 people. There's a portion of our country right now that's deciding that they aren't really their biological, they're not their biological.
What was assigned.
What was assigned to them at birth because of their genitalia, but rather was just what they feel now in the moment. And what we know from the research, and what's so interesting is, it's important for us to understand this, that when you're operating against biology right now, when you're going against some of what your genitalia has assigned to you at the beginning, it just has disastrous results relative to the increases in suicide and cutting,
gender dysphoria,
and depression, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
I think another part of that, and I have had a commentary or two about this, that it's in a certain generation, it's cool right now to question your gender identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are websites where if someone has got maybe a friend who has identified as the opposite sex they were born, then you might go to a website and say, kind of just check into this. And then there are websites that are encouraging people to do this, to switch over. And then there's the medical community. And this is another part of our wealth that we have, that suddenly these treatments, hormonal treatments and surgical treatments, are becoming mainstream in some medical associations, that pediatricians who fight against this are being marginalized. And it's because there's money out there somewhere to cover all of this. Even being our military, our government is being asked to fund these types of things within the military, and that's a huge contingent of people. I don't know how many there really are in the military, but there are some. And so no matter how many there are, it just becomes a huge issue. And, as my husband, he just uses the term, it's very simple. But when you hear stories about people being fired because they won't use the right pronoun, we're entering into nonsense. And for some reason, because of this financial success that our country is experiencing right now, it makes it easier to enter into that nonsense.
Yeah, you're able to indulge in these type of conversations when you can't have those conversations when you're having to have the conversation of, well, where's the next meal coming from? Yeah. How are we going to pay down this bill right now? When those conversations when those conversations aren't being had, you're able to think what we would argue is higher level thinking, which is kind of some of the self-actualization that Maslow, again, and just a reminder, especially for our listeners that are of the Christian faith, that there's nothing new underneath the sun, that these are conversations that have been had in the past. And thankfully, we've, as Winston Churchill said, we haven't made it this far because we're made of hard sugar candy. That we've been able to endure past these moments. And so it's not a doom and gloom. It's okay, well, we just need to learn from the past in order we don't perpetuate some of those mistakes.
But the sad part of it is, as the Christian influence wanes, unless the Christian influence rises again, and I think that's what we and our listeners, would love to see and pray for and work for. If it doesn't, then we don't have that mitigating influence. So, it's pretty scary.
Well, and again, today they asked me to call a few of our donors, and as I was talking to them, it was interesting. First of all, everybody picked up. You're used to making these calls and talking to nothing but voicemail. But to a person, they were saying, I appreciate your common sense perspective. I appreciate your civility. We just got a lot of compliments. And so if you're one of those individuals that appreciate this, and when I come back, I have some callers that want to talk about that as well. We do want to challenge you to consider what you might do in the last few hours. We're now down to the last few hours of 2018. And so one of the things you can do is go to the website, pointofview.net. You can do what Nick suggested to some of his fellow millennials out there, or even if you're not, to click on that button and to give. We have a matching fund, which means you can give $10 and it becomes $20, $100 becomes $200. But if you'd like to talk to someone, the off-air line, which is for your pledges, is 800-347-5151. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
Once upon a time, a banker made an offer. For every mortgage payment you make today, we will credit your account for 2. If you received that offer, would you make a payment? I know I would. I'd find a way to make more than one. Opportunities that good don't come along often, and you need to jump on them when they do. Like most stories that begin once upon a time, that one never happened. But I do know of a real opportunity to double your investment when you give today. You care about this country. You try to love your neighbors. And when you invest in Point of View Radio today, you help bring about the kind of changes you want to see in this land. And thanks to an offer not from a banker, but from special friends of Point of View, your investment today, whatever you can do, will be doubled. But you must give today. Invest online at pointofview.net or by phone 800-347-5151. The opportunity is here. Make your next bold move right now. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Give today. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Year in review, and if you would like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We're going to take a phone call here in just a minute. Round the round table, Penna Dexter and Dr. Nick Pitts, and we have information about both of them. As a matter of fact, a minute ago, Penna talked about transgender. She's written some very good commentaries. If you go to the website, pointofview.net, and look at viewpoints, you can hit see more viewpoints, and then you can type in her name or transgender. You can find all of her articles on the hashtag #MeToo and all sorts of other things she's written about. Of course, you can find my commentaries as well. If you'd like to sign up, just click on that red button and you can sign up. You'll receive my commentaries Monday through Friday. Hers is on Saturday. My commentary today is on the top stories of 2018. If you say, okay, I want to get all the wisdom of Nick Pitts, that will be a daily dose that you can get by clicking on his picture. Go down, you'll see the daily briefing, and they can go there and find that arriving in their inbox every single day, except when he was in Thailand, and I missed you.
I know.
So I'm glad you're back.
The wisdom is very small in nature, so it's a very short email, but nevertheless, I like to think that it's entertaining.
It's compact.
Yeah. It's succinct.
And for everybody that wants to get the facts and figures, you have that there. For people that want to know what are the most important viral videos, that is always there.
I got you.
And if you want to see any connections to any kind of music whatsoever, this man has in his brain almost every song that was ever sung and finds a connection almost always between some news item and some song, right?
Yeah. My head, inside my head right now is a musical that's going on. And I'm just grateful to be the tap dancer that gets a chance to play a little bit in the midst of it.
So again, those are all available at our website, pointofview.net. And as you support us, of course, you're having access to all that material. So let me encourage you to do so. But let's head out, first of all, to New Hampshire, listening on WSEW. Bob, thank you for joining us today. What's your point of view?
Well, first of all, I'd like to speak a word of encouragement to you. A good conservative voice is needed because 19 out of the 21 major news outlets are liberal. All right. Also, I'd like to say that those liberals are really giving Trump a raking over the coals. They're lying about right and left. They're saying he's sleeping with whores and his wife won't even sleep with him, which isn't true. I know that because I know that he became a Christian some years ago, and he doesn't do that anymore. And furthermore, what liberals do is they take what they do and put conservative names on it. Think about it. Hillary is a socialist. She isn't. I doubt very much that she even believes in democracy. Bill Clinton was the same way. I understand. I heard him say that he did accept Christ as his Lord and Savior late in life, but he was a socialist too. And Obama is a Muslim. He is not a Christian.
One of the things he raises, interestingly enough, is back to your point, Penna, and that is, it used to be that people maybe would flirt with some of these socialist ideas or other kinds of very liberal, progressive ideas, but they would hide that. I would have to say that it isn't just the Bernie Sanders now or the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but if you look at some of the issues that the leading candidates for the presidency next time on the Democratic Party are holding to, in almost every case, they're holding to views which a few years ago would have been considered Bernie Sanders only issues. And now they've become issues sort of mainstream in the Democratic Party, don't you think?
Yes. And, I think we all could have predicted this back during the Clinton years when they sort of pushed back on Hillary care and socialized medicine. But really, that's one of the areas where it's becoming mainstream to promote something like Medicare for all, some kind of a single payer healthcare system. Because look at Obamacare; it's been it's too capitalist still, and it's not working, and it's too expensive. So we need to go further. I mean, I don't want to say I told you so, but when it's something as core to the need of the human person as healthcare and your health, then you might give up some freedom to get it. And I think that's what the discussion will be. Maybe not on the surface, but I think when people start to accept these socialist ideas, it's because of certain human needs that they think the government can fill rather than being filled by individuals and families through the private sector.
Well, again, let's look at some of the candidates. Again, we're going to be looking at the past, but past is prologue to the future. Joe Biden, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, who just announced her exploratory committee, maybe even Robert Francis O'Rourke. On issues of single payer, Medicare for all, I think all of them sign off on that. Maybe not Joe Biden. Free college tuition, most of them sign off on that. The idea of guaranteed basic income, most of them sign off on that. Most of them talk about the idea of abolishing ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Many of them talk about a living wage of $15 an hour. Those were
free college.
Yeah, free college. Those are sort of outliers just a few years ago. Nick, those almost are becoming mainstream right now.
So if you go onto my Twitter, you'll see an article I referenced, and I think it's really important for us to consider, and especially if you're looking to the other side right now, the New Yorker, Jonathan Chait, put in an article that delineated between what's happening within the Bernie camp and then with the Beto O'Rourke camp.
Right.
And what he said was that the reason why Beto is the biggest threat to Bernie is because Beto is not Bernie, even though Beto is really courting Bernie bros or Bernie supporters. Right. Because Bernie, I mean, if you look at Elizabeth Warren, for example, she supports socialist policies, but really she even says in her own words, like she's a capitalist to the very core of her being. And so
she used to be a Republican.
Yeah. And so she had that huge piece or that huge interview on CNBC where she continued to say, I'm capitalist to my bones, but I do support certain socialist policies. And Bernie, the reason why Bernie, I disagree with probably about 90%. I would say that's just an arbitrary number. I disagree significantly with many of Bernie Sanders' positions. But one of the things that I do admire about Bernie is he has fiercely and boldly convictional in his beliefs. Right. I don't agree with those beliefs, but man, that he is so convictional in those beliefs, and he is convictional in the fact that he's a socialist. Now, you won't pin that on Representative O'Rourke. You won't pin that on Elizabeth Warren. You won't pin that on Cory Booker. You won't pin that on Senator Harris. But what Bernie does is he does double down on that socialist language, and what Bernie supporters are beginning to understand is they don't want a socialist light when it comes to a Booker, a Harris, or O'Rourke. What they want is a socialist, and that's a faction of the Democratic Party right now. That really is that is very much is being kind of swayed, one might be able to say, by just the emotional uproar that is the Beto O'Rourke idea right now. And it'll just be interesting to see moving forward if Bernie supporters continue to follow along with Bernie right now, especially today, for example. I know that there's a meeting that's happening relative to some of the sexual allegations that happened during the 2016 campaign with the Bernie camp, that they're going to be airing out some of those grievances. It'll be interesting to see, though, nevertheless, if some of those core constituencies with Bernie, the young, the male, the college-educated, stick with Bernie, or they end up migrating over towards Beto.
And you and I both said that we could see a Robert Francis O'Rourke taking the oath of office January 21st, 2021. Kelly Shackford says there's not a chance. So, I mean, I recognize that we got different viewpoints even around our roundtable here, but it is interesting to see that getting the youth vote with the millennials, you'll be talking about this probably on Wednesday when we get back together here, as well as some of the issues that are animating to the younger audience. Could be, we'll see.
And let's just look back at history really quickly. Let's look back at history and look at the last time a Republican was after 4 years at the midterm was facing a Democratic opponent. And we can look at I'll go back to 1992 specifically. Nobody in their right mind was even considering a man from Hope at this point right now.
Nope, that's very true.
He was out of left field. We were talking.
He was running with the idea that he'd run in the future.
Oh yeah, there was nobody that was talking about Bill Clinton at 90. They weren't talking about him in 1992 in January. It wasn't until February and March that they started talking. So the idea that we have somehow got this settled already is far from the truth right now.
As we so well know. Penna, we've been around here. Don't you love a guy that's wise beyond his years? Because he was just a kid back then. We actually experienced him. Remember, we were broadcasting then during that time.
I'm with Kelly, though. I mean, Bill Clinton was at least a governor of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
state. Beto O'Rourke couldn't win the Senate race in Texas. Not that that
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
an easy feat by any means, but I mean, there have been some surprising things happen in politics, a la Donald Trump being president.
Yeah.
That's a big shock. So, I mean, you can't say that, this can't happen, but wow, I find it very difficult. I don't think that the Republican Party the Democrat Party across the board in this country is there yet. I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot
Maybe
of
it's a Biden O'Rourke,
Yeah.
ticket.
There are
which
a
is
lot
what
of
they're talking
socialists,
about.
but not enough.
I don't know. It'd be interesting. We got a bank of phone calls too, so we're going to take some of those. And even as we're looking back to 2018, we're looking ahead to 2020 as well. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Ben Franklin reportedly said, "There is nothing certain in life except for death and taxes." Well, in a 548-page complaint, one man has targeted at least one of those certainties, and it's not death. Terry Lee Hines contends that the United States tax code has violated the Constitution by establishing taxism and institutionalized faith and religion. Because the tax code has the effect of favoring and even promoting organized religions through tax breaks and other benefits, Mr. Hines believes the tax code is in violation of the First Amendment. Well, I suppose this is the sort of case that law students are forced to grapple with, but actually have little effect in the real world. Some may dream such a lawsuit is the silver bullet to bring down our ghoulish tax system. Alas, Mr. Hines' lawsuit will not free us from the taxman's visit every April 15. For one reason, taxpayers have a lot of hurdles to overcome just to bring the lawsuit. Mere allegations, even ones dressed up in the garb of a First Amendment challenge, that they do not like to pay taxes will not be sufficient. For now, Mr. Hines and the rest of us will have to continue to pay our taxes, and most importantly, the religious charities and houses of worship that are exempt from them will continue to be exempt. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. You can protect your religious freedom by going to firstliberty.org to download your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit. Our attorneys created kits for churches, ministries, Christian schools, military members, students, and teachers, and the workplace. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
One of our favorite lines is sometimes we should keep the microphones going during the debate that takes place when we're off the air. But when we're on the air, we got some callers that will to stimulate that debate. So we'll go to Georgia first of all, WAGP. And Larry, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Good afternoon. I don't know how I can articulate this, but I see that our youth, our millennials, and even younger, they're being, absorbed into a type of education that the idea of socialism is a good idea. Yep. And there's no one seemingly trying to educate them on, okay, let's look at the history of this and see just how good it works for a country.
One of the reasons
And
I
I'm
wrote
not-
that booklet on capitalism and socialism is I want to give that little booklet to any young person that's convinced that socialism is the answer. But Penna, we've talked about the problem of education, but in part is also personal experience. If I talk about socialism to our generation, we think of the Soviet Union, we think of the Iron Curtain, we think of the Berlin Wall. If we talk about socialism to the younger generation, they think maybe Venezuela, which isn't exactly a positive, but in most cases they think Sweden, and they think Norway, Denmark. They think, that's just pretty. So it's a different kind of mindset too, isn't it?
It is a different kind of mindset, but those countries, they're so homogeneous and smaller that it doesn't apply. But I think back to the education and really the university, where this is just, the hotbed of teaching it, and there's almost no chance to go to a public university and not be confronted with it. But now there's this attack on even the institutions of higher learning that are Christian and conservative. They are under severe attack from the left to have to compromise their biblical values. And so I think that plays into this. I think that many of those institutions are at risk of being destroyed. So we won't have an alternative for teaching the bright young conservatives from Christian families. That is under attack right now, and it's of great concern.
So here's the thing where we can take great hope in. So the numbers don't look good when it comes to millennials increasingly favoring socialism over capitalism. But if you look past those numbers and you dig into what millennials actually think socialism is, the good news is they don't know what socialism is.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's quite literally it's ignorance. It's ignorance. They don't understand the tenets of socialism, and so they like the idea of it, but they don't know what's necessarily composed in it. And so that's really good news, because everyone always cites that Harvard study that indicated that they favor socialism over capitalism. But then when you look further down into the numbers, they really don't understand what socialism is. Right. And so there's that piece to it. And then the second piece to it is that's just a larger part of just the lack of. And I'm not trying to put this on schools whatsoever. And maybe I'm just putting this on lack of reading, lack of curiosity that's happening right now. There was the study that came out over the week where there's so many that still don't know what the Holocaust.
Yes.
They don't know the components of the Holocaust right now. We've gone back into that study that indicated that upwards of 60% of Americans can't even pass a citizenship test right now. I mean, there's just a lot that we have become so overwhelmed with information. We don't necessarily know the information that we don't have the wisdom that comes from actually internalizing it and actually know it. So there's that component that we can take heart that, yes, there's certain numbers that are very alarming right now, but it appears as though those concepts that are being communicated, they don't know necessarily what it consists of in those numbers, which makes it a battle that I think the idea is the truth wins out, and when the truth wins out, Christians win.
That's why it's so important to speak the truth, because I think one thing that millennials and just younger Americans, and I think this is always true across the generations, is you have a compassionate heart. When you see glaring needs out there, you want them met. And so, for the government to meet, it sounds efficient. And that's really socialism in a sense. Mm-hmm. And so that can be co-opted by the far left. Mm-hmm. And so we have a challenge, as you just said. And it's a great challenge for us to articulate truth, help people understand history, what's worked and what hasn't, and also the extreme evil that can come out of socialist ideas when they go to their fullest flowering.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we don't even have to look to history. We can just look down south to Venezuela right now. There's certain instances where some of these ideas are playing out, and they're just having devastating effects right now.
Yeah, well, even in China.
Yeah, in China.
I mean, you're seeing more people
Cuba.
rising standard of living, but you're also seeing Venezuela. A lot of people abused.
Mm-hmm. But again, one of the things is we need to educate the next generation. So I know, let's do a millennial roundtable. Would that be a good idea?
Yeah, I think we should do that. I feel really good about that idea.
And again, that's one of the things that we've tried to do. We have booklets, we have videos, we, of course, have a roundtable to really educate the next generation. And so, Nick, thank you for doing that.
Thank you for putting up with me and some of my crazy ideas and illustrations and movie references and song lyrics that hopefully are trying to tie into some coherent idea. I resonated with the caller who says, I don't really know how to communicate this, but I'm just going to start. I feel like that's literally every time the attention turns to me. I'm like, well, here goes nothing. Let's just throw out some stuff.
Let's, if we can, for just a minute. I do have some other callers and someone to talk about the issue of health care, because that's going to be a big issue in the campaign and some others and certainly things. But before we do so, since we are coming to the end of this segment and the end of this year, Penna, for just a minute, talk about that, because you've been around Point of View for a long time, and give us a good reason why an individual that hasn't supported Point of View might consider supporting us today.
I think a lot of people that care about the culture and are, especially people that are biblically based or religious people, want to do something. And a lot of times you don't know what you can really do to advance conservative Christian biblical ideas. Well, there is one thing you can do. We have this great outlet here that's on hundreds of stations across the country and that educates people every single day. And as Nick was just saying, how many things he does in his when he's hosting, pulling together music and ideas and quotes. And we have the time to do that. I mean, this is rare to have 2 hours a day. We really broadcast 3 hours because we also have a first hour that goes mostly to Texas. So you can make that happen with your dollars. You can do your job and take that part of your income that God would really have you take and help Point of View broadcast. We are fully listener supported. There's no corporate sponsorship. There's no big organization that funds us. It's you. And so I just think that, it's an opportunity for you. Yes, it's a nice gift to us when you give. It's also an opportunity, though, for you, the folks listening to Point of View. So we ask today that you would think about this year, the year end, our planning for next year. Your gift today will make a difference for all of that.
I think that's one of the things that excites me so much, too, is because, one, just a cursory read of the biblical narrative, we continue to see that it's greater to give than it is to receive. The social science backs it up, that not only individuals that are giving, they're more charitable, they have a greater optimistic outlook on life, they have their health levels are better, their blood pressure is usually better. And this is just scientific research, but also just the idea of what you're giving to. I think one of the things that I so appreciate about Point of View is it's not what I see on TV. Like I'm just so frustrated. And again, this is coming from a guy that goes on TV. I get so frustrated when it's just literally, if it bleeds, it leads. It's just these outlier examples that don't accurately convey what's actually happening within 85% of the country. It's these outlier extremes that are giving voices that are unaccurately portraying the other side. What happens with Point of View is there's this confidence that Kerby can take. There's this confidence that the staff can take that knows that truth always wins out. And for the Christian, there's such a richness in knowing that, and there's a confidence that spouts from that because we recognize that we don't have to win every particular battle because we know we've already won the war. Our battles are, when we're on truth's side, we're always going to win out by His grace. And I'm grateful to be a part of the Point of View team that really does champion this idea of truth and tries to help others be empowered by that truth.
Well, we're going to take a break, but this would be a great time for you to go to the website, pointofview.net. We have a matching fund, which means that your gift will be doubled. Or, of course, if you'd like to talk to someone, that number is 800-347-5151. We'll give you an update right after these important messages.
A banker made an offer. For every mortgage payment you make today, we will credit your account for 2. If you receive that offer, would you make a payment? I know I would. I'd find a way to make more than 1. Opportunities that good don't come along often, and you need to jump on them when they do. Like most stories that begin once upon a time, that one never happened. But I do know of a real opportunity to double your investment when you give today. You care about this country. You try to love your neighbors. And when you invest in Point of View Radio today, you help bring about the kind of changes you want to see in this land. And thanks to an offer not from a banker, but from special friends of Point of View, your investment today, whatever you can do, will be doubled. But you must give today. Invest online at pointofview.net or by phone, 800-347-5151. The opportunity is here. Make your next bold move right now. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Give today. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Back once again. If you would like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We're doing kind of a year in review. Let me just also give you a programming note that about 2 hours from now, if you are on Facebook, and I hope you will be there, we're going to be also doing a live broadcast. So we'll continue on in some of the conversation we're having today about this year in review. I might mention my commentary today is called Top Stories of 2018. So you can certainly listen this hour, watch this hour, as we have in studio with us Penna, Dexter, and Dr. Nick Pitts. But also you can watch the broadcast on Facebook Live in about 2 hours from now. So again, that's just a little bit of a programming note. Posted a couple of articles. We have links to the various viewpoints commentary, which I've encouraged you to go and look at some of the ones that Penna Dexter has produced this year. If you'd like to go and know more about the daily briefing, we have a link there, and you can sign up for both of those. So just some other ways in which you can benefit from the expertise around the table. And Penna, I always think it is just such a privilege for me to be able to sit here, or as sometimes you've sat here, or Nick has as well, and interview some of these guests and learn so much from those individuals. I'm learning just like everybody else. I know you are as well.
Sometimes when we have a great author on, for instance, and, I'm reading the book and thinking, I get to read this book and distill it and ask the author questions, which is a great privilege, and then, help other people to understand those concepts. And, that's the beauty of Point of View. It's our guests, the people we bring to the microphone, and our callers, folks asking questions and bringing up good points during the program. And then, hopefully those of us that get to sit in your chair and you, we're ready too with as much as we can offer.
We will take some of your phone calls this hour. I'll just get to a call here in just a minute, 1-800-351-1212. But just a few minutes, I'll give you a different number, and that is the pledge line number, because as we said, we're coming to now this last hour of our broadcast this year, except for the short one that you'll get a chance to see on Facebook Live if you tune that in as well. We have a goal that was almost met. We back when we started the program a couple hours ago, we needed $73,000, which sounds like a lot, but I noticed the last 2 years in December 31st, we brought in $73,000, so we might actually meet that in the last day. So I think that's possible, and I know we've already exceeded that, so I think we're in pretty good shape. But again, we still need to hear from you. So we still have that matching fund. That means your gift of $100 becomes $200, a gift of $500 becomes $1,000. But we're just spending some time kind of looking at our year in review. And since some have been waiting a while to express their point of view, let's go have a chance to hear from, in this particular case, Jim in Wisconsin. Jim, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. You mentioned earlier about health care and the fact that the Democrats want government health care and all. But one of the things that I think that the Republican side has failed to do is succinctly either address the issue or provide a clear example of what health care should look like. I mean, I work for a great employer that provides great health insurance, but I also have friends and relatives that have to pay high premiums for their health insurance, and they struggle deeply with that cost. Health insurance is health care costs are very high. So I don't know if you can articulate it or if you can point me in the right direction, but I don't feel like I hear a very succinct alternative to what the Democrats present.
Well, and to make your case, of course, Elizabeth Warren today, as she started her exploratory committee, and I had a chance to watch her video, focused a lot of time and attention on that. And, Penna, what we have right now is it's neither feast nor famine. It's neither right or wrong, and left or right. It's kind of a weird mixture in which we had a little bit of a free market healthcare system that then moved into one that was overly regulated by the Affordable Care Act. And so even though the previous president promised that we would actually have a benefit of $2,500 a month in terms of savings, instead what we ended up with is exactly what Jim's talked about, just high deductibles, high premiums, and individuals having to pay an enormous amount for a health care policy that doesn't meet any of their needs. And it seems to me that we're going to go one of the two directions. Either we go to Medicare for all, which I think is a disaster, or we need to go back to a free market system where the market is able to function so that individuals, first of all, have transparency. When I went into a doctor's office the other day, and when I started asking what it was going to cost, they looked at me like I'd come from another planet, which
who asked that?
Yeah. When I go into Chipotle, I know what I'm going to pay for,
exactly.
right? And so that's the first issue. And number two, I still think that the Ben Carson, who's now the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, should have been the head of Health and Human Services, suggested maybe having many more of these kind of health care accounts so that individuals control their own destiny, get government out of the way between doctors and patients, get the bureaucracy out of the way, get insurance companies out of the way so that we can actually have a health care system that is working on some kind of free market principles.
I think just like we talked about the immigration debate earlier, it's not a good idea to propose a comprehensive system that would just cover everything, every aspect of this, every contingency. That's what national health care tries to do, and that's what conservatives really need to push back against. You cannot do that. In a free market system, first of all, different states are different. You have different demographics in different states, so I think it's better not to have it national, but to have it spread out to the degree the government is involved at all. But I think the health savings account hasn't been given a chance, really, to play itself out and show its power. It could be a very powerful tool. Insurance used to be for catastrophic events and didn't cover every little thing. And perhaps with the health savings accounts, you can move back to that, where you have a policy that doesn't break the bank, that's for catastrophic events, and then you begin putting away money, perhaps tax-free, to cover the rest. And then you start shopping for your insurance. So that concept is good. You can work with some of these free market concepts and start to rebuild a system that could be actually more free and use more of those capitalist principles than the one we had before we even started with Obamacare. Because Obamacare took a system that was already there were many government fingers in lots of areas of it, and but the insurance system, it just was destroyed, or at least began to be destroyed under Obamacare, and so that was a mistake. Obamacare was just a big mistake. I mean, a lot of people saw it, but a lot of people had a lot of hope in it. I don't think too many people are very hopeful about it anymore.
You just had a judge that just declared Obamacare unconstitutional. Now he's put a stay on that. But immediately we started talking with people like Dr. Merrill Matthews of saying, well, couldn't we go back, let's use the state of Texas since we're broadcasting from there, to one that has a high-risk pool so that we recognize we do need a safety net for some people that don't have access to the kind of program or the kind of insurance policy that Jim apparently has.
Or you have a terrible pre-existing condition.
Yeah, or things of that nature. So you would want to provide that. But again, I will take a break. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about it. There are some solutions, and Jim's right. Maybe we need to encourage some of these people running for office to do a better job of articulating what they are. We'll take a break. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, as 2018 is winding down, it's worth taking a moment to look back over the year and consider some of the top stories. We often find that stories that start in one year continue to the next. Sometimes new stories in the coming year remind us of stories of the previous year. Of course, 2018 was an election year. Coverage of the congressional campaigns dominated much of the news coverage, especially in the fall. Democrats will take control of the House of Representatives, and we should expect conflict and gridlock this next year. One of the major political events of 2018 was the Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Brett Kavanaugh in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Confirmation hearings are always full of conflict and political theater. This time, conflict reached a new level with the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller continued his investigation that already has cost $25 million. We should get a final report in 2019. Earlier in the year were the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea. The medal winners and the political intrigue made them worth watching each night. And finally, we had a number of natural disasters that destroyed large sections of land and killed so many people. Hurricane Florence devastated the Carolinas and surrounding regions with up to 40 inches of rain, severe flooding, and winds up to 90 miles an hour. More than 40 people died. In November, multiple wildfires burned in both northern and southern California. The Camp Fire was the deadliest American fire in 100 years. It burned over 150,000 acres and killed 85 people. The Woolsey Fire burned over 96,000 acres in Southern California. As 2018 comes to a close, it's worth remembering some of these and other news stories that made this year one to remember. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Jim in Wisconsin really raised a very important question, and that is, this is going to be a big issue. Already, there are individuals saying, look, I have an insurance policy, a medical insurance policy right now that has such high deductibles, I'll never use it, but I've been forced by the Affordable Care Act to actually pay for it because I'm supposed to. Now that's maybe changed with the ruling that's come down from a judge, and past is prologue to the future. I think this next year, the big debate will be, okay, if you don't like Obamacare, what do you want? Medicare for all, or you want to go back to a free market system? And I still think the better way to go is to have a system which recognizes that when we mandated a universal kind of plan for everybody in the country, people that our listeners in Georgia complained because they were in a state, for example, where there were very few mandates for a health care policy. So as a result, they could buy a cheaper policy. It didn't cover as much, but they could afford it. Whereas our listeners in New Jersey, where the mandates were very, very high, had very expensive policies. Well, when the Affordable Care Act came into being, Penna, Dexter, as you well know, the requirements were all these different mandates, which made the policies very expensive and the premiums very expensive. And as a result, you had lots of people calling in saying, I have a policy right now that I have to pay for every month, and I'll never use it. And I would rather have a catastrophic policy and then maybe have a health savings account where I make the choice about which doctor, which drug I use, and I use those medical resources in a way that most effectively helps me and my family.
This is one of those areas where perhaps it needed to begin playing itself out and really the hurt could be felt by a lot of people, because I think a lot of us look at this and we've been there. We have been in years when we had to buy, for instance, maybe you're buying insurance on the individual market and you're out there with a $9,000 deductible, and you will never use that. And so, but then your policy has to be so expensive because the government has mandated all these requirements. So for President Trump to go back through the regulatory system and say, let's have some short-term temporary policies. Let's have some policies that don't require everything, like maybe chiropractic or, other things, pregnancy for men. Let's have some policies that don't necessarily have to have the full gamut, so they aren't so expensive. So, that's one area where I think we can come back with some different ideas to try. And in this case, in the healthcare arena, there is the possibility of trying some different things. And so I think that's where we have to come up with ideas. You don't have to come up with a whole national healthcare system. You need to come up with small ideas and try them out.
Well, so that's one of the issues that I think is going to be big in 2019. I think immigration has always been a big issue, but it's going to be a bigger issue. Nick, let me come to you again, because the debate right now, the reason we have the 10th day of the shutdown, and I'll say something I've mentioned before, there's some people who think this shutdown will last all the way up to when President Trump does the State of the Union address. That's January 22nd. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to hear all sorts of stories about trash piling up in the parks, individuals that are government employees who can't pay their rent, don't have enough money to take their kid to the doctor. This is going to get pretty nasty pretty fast, isn't it?
I have so many questions more than I have answers when you think about the government shutdown right now. One, we don't know what the points are that individuals are trying to convey. We know the Republican side that they do want the $5 billion for the wall, but even the wall has been that's been a little bit murky over the last couple of days. Is it for wall or is it for border security? Democrats haven't come out yet and really established what it is that they're fighting for right now. They're fighting against this wall, but to a certain degree, they're willing to fund part of it with this $1.4 or $1.6 trillion. Where is President Trump in the midst of this right now? You would imagine if he's staying back in Washington, away from Florida, he would be using the bully pulpit and using the Oval Office area in D.C. to show the stark contrast between him still trying to do work and Nancy Pelosi being in Hawaii right now. But he hasn't been in front of a camera right now.
I don't understand any of this. I'm with you.
And then it does go down to the fact that we do have an immigration issue right now. We continue to talk about it. It's for better and it's for worse right now. That we see the value of the immigrant. We see the value of the contributions that have been made in the past and how much significance they can add into the present. But we're a country of rules. We're a country of laws. And that rule of law is tied directly towards our economic prosperity as well as human flourishing right now. And when we don't heed the rule of law, it's detrimental not only for the immigrant that's trying to get in, but also for the citizens that are already in right now. And so I think with our listeners, there's a lot of individuals out there right now that are trying to figure out what does it look like to kind of move forward on this, especially here in Texas. We want to have that border security. It's very essential. It's significant for us because Texans are bearing a brunt of that. Our Governor Abbott has come out and said that we've spent upwards of $1 billion on this.
Yes.
And we're a state. We're not a federal government. And so we've got certain things that we've got to balance. We have certain dictums that we have to heed right now. And so I think we're looking for leadership, especially since this is one of those constitutionally outlined responsibilities that our federal government is supposed to do right now. And so we're looking for some leadership from Washington in this particular arena.
I think you've made this case with Kelly. On Friday, I heard a bit of that with you and Kelly and Debbie, that why would you not want a wall? It's not very expensive, really, in the scheme of things. So it's really a political decision. It's for or against border security is really the question. And so I think I don't know why they're staying quiet. You'd think it would be a good opportunity to make that point, but perhaps there's been a calculation that it's better just to, over the holidays, just let it let it sit for a while.
Yeah, I don't understand the opposing side. Like, I understand wanting to fight for the immigrant, because as a Christian, I am impressed by the idea that I can't read the biblical narrative and not know that there's an interest to be made of compassion towards the stranger and foreigner. Now, I think what's warped in that understanding from the Democratic side is that compassion means entrance into the country. And I don't think that's what compassion means. I think compassion, just like love, can take on a variety of different forms. For some people, compassion can be giving me a Coke Zero right now. I just realized that I'm holding this right now. But compassion isn't simply limited to giving me a Coke Zero. Compassion can be opening a door. Compassion can be filling up my gas tank. And so we need to see, yes, especially for the Christian, we should be compassionate, but compassion is not limited to entrance into a country. Compassion can take a variety of forms, and I think that's one of the things that we need to begin considering and debating right now, because we are a country, we're a sovereign nation. We need to have border security.
Yeah, well, I think we certainly do. And again, one of the lines that you've used before, Penna, is, and we've heard the president say this, is a country is not a country without a border. Mm-hmm. And there are other countries that have had borders and have, and again, we're not talking about a wall that keeps everybody out. We're talking about a wall with a door, or a fence with a door. And we want to be able to know who's coming in. We let in, Nick, about 1 million people every year legally, and sometimes we let in another 1 million illegally, because we don't control our borders.
And so here's an argument we'll make from statistics. Traditionally, over the past, we'll go all the way back to 1950. We let in approximately around 22% of the country was made up of immigrants.
Right.
And since then, it's expanded to most significantly during the 70s. It was around 25%, but now it's around 13 to 15% over the past 3 years. Well, I think those are important numbers to be able to know. Now, we're at a much more prosperous time, as we were just talking about previously, relative to the transgender situation. We're at a much more prosperous time right now, and so we have an ability potentially to let more individuals in. But we also need to understand, on the flip side, we're in a much more dangerous time right now, where there are a significant number of enemies that right now that don't like us, and we've seen this kind of guerrilla warfare begin to mount up. And so we need to be cautious about who we're letting in right now. And so I think there are equal and opposite things that we need to be considering right now.
And again, even the kind of person we want to bring in. We right now have more jobs than we have people to fill them, but the kind of jobs that need to be filled are going to be people that have background in biochemistry or data processing or something of that nature. So it's something else to think about.
We're the pretty girl at the prom, and we get to be choosy right now, okay? Unfortunately for the ugly guys like myself, it can be a little unfortunate, but we're the pretty girl at the prom, which isn't a bad thing.
Well, we're taking a break here, and when we come back, I want to get into a couple of other issues, maybe the Green New Deal, and we've had all these forest fires and hurricanes, and it's all blamed on global warming.
I actually blame it on the Philadelphia Eagles fans, because they're destroying Philadelphia whenever they win. What else are they going to destroy now?
You did that for our engineer, Andrew. But we need to take a break. And so while we do that, that is a great time for you to visit our website, pointofview.net. Coming to the last half hour of our broadcast, so we certainly need to hear from you because it's the last day of 2018. So visit the website, click on that button, or if you'd like to give us a call and talk off air and make your pledge, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
Once upon a time, a banker made an offer. For every mortgage payment you make today, we will credit your account for 2. If you received that offer, would you make a payment? I know I would. I'd find a way to make more than one. Opportunities that good don't come along often, and you need to jump on them when they do. Like most stories that begin once upon a time, that one never happened. But I do know of a real opportunity to double your investment when you give today. You care about this country. You try to love your neighbors. And when you invest in Point of View Radio today, you help bring about the kind of changes you want to see in this land. And thanks to an offer not from a banker, but from special friends of Point of View, your investment today, whatever you can do, will be doubled. But you must give today. Invest online at pointofview.net or by phone, 800-347-5151. 5151. The opportunity is here. Make your next bold move right now. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Give today. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Final half hour of the broadcast, final day of the year. And so if you have not sent in your gift or have not called us or visited the website pointofview.net, you are now in the last few hours of the opportunity.
As the great 80s band Europe said, it's the final countdown.
So it is. We'll get a phone call in just a minute. Let me give you a program note. First of all, tomorrow we actually will play a tape on New Year's Day, but then 2 days from now, Nick will be sitting here and we'll have our Millennial Roundtable. Friday, we'll have our weekend edition, so all of that's taking place. And about an hour and a half from now, if you want to watch on Facebook Live, we'll do a live broadcast that is kind of just a follow-up to all of that. But let's take some phone calls real quickly. We'll go to New Mexico. First of all, Steve, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Well, first of all, Kirby, thank you very much for taking my phone call here this afternoon in Farmington, New Mexico, heart of the Four Corners. Kirby, I'm from the Boot Hills, New Mexico on the Frontera. My family farmed and ranched to about 30 miles north of the Mexican border. My father employed campesinos braceros way back when. But you know what? We have seen an increase of violence down on the border as well.
Yes.
And along with that, we've also seen that of deaths as well. Matter of fact, we've had a rancher friend of ours, matter of fact, that was killed because he found a cache of drugs on his ranch land, and he was killed the following day, matter of fact, by some drug cartel individuals, some mules. And you know what? It's time for our government to really step up and begin to protect America and protect Americans. You know, that poor police officer that's recently shot by an immigrant as well, that was over here illegal as well. You know, but I've got really good friends that are from Mexico as well. I mean, but I wish we could find a happy medium. But right now, we need to protect our borders from this issue. We really do. And the government workers, I think that senators alike, I think if other employees are on furloughs, I think they themselves should not receive a paycheck. And so that's my comment for today, Kirby. And we just need to have God more in our country and more prayer. And I think we could solve a lot more problems than what they're trying to solve on their own based upon putting our trusted leaders and so on and et cetera.
Well, I appreciate your phone call there. There's supposed to be very good fly fishing up there, too, so I'm going to get over to that part of New Mexico in the future. But he said two things that I think we might want to focus on. Number one, the danger at the border, which sometimes gets ignored. And when we've had individuals call that are near the border, they talk about what they have to endure there. And then the other point he said in passing, I want to emphasize again, we don't want to treat everybody that's trying to cross the border as an enemy. We don't want to paint with a broad brush. We recognize that a lot of individuals come to this country because they'd like to become American citizens. They want to experience the American dream. They don't mean us harm, but it's trying to figure out which ones are going to make good citizens and which ones are here to do us harm. And so that's another aspect of what he talked about. But
I think a good clue about who would be coming in that would be a good citizen and who wouldn't is who would be willing to go through the process of coming in legally and who is going to, bring your child and try to storm the border to get in any way that you can. Who's going to tell the truth about needing asylum and who's going to, stretch the truth. So, honesty. We want honest citizens, number one. I think, we talked about compassion earlier and the biblical compassion that we read in the scriptures. But that compassion has to be, if you're going to call a country compassionate, and, then you have to look at all your citizens. And so we've got people that are living in this country that may have, for instance, be descended from someone that came here from the South, from Mexico, from South America, that's here. Do we want their country diluted and damaged by this open borders philosophy? No, we don't. That philosophy does not help a country to remain compassionate. So the rule of law allows us to be compassionate. If we throw it out, then we're just putting our fingers in dikes to try to stop violence and crime.
Yeah, I'm convinced that right now, especially when it comes to, I feel like Taylor Swift can pretty much just summarize what's happening relative to immigration right now, what's happening to healthcare right now, and to a certain degree, the educational system right now, that we have put a lot of Band-Aids on bullet holes. We haven't holistically really fixed some of these significant issues that are plaguing us right now that are really beginning to take root, and I think would be very unfortunate, especially with healthcare right now, We're seeing how there's just certain issues that we just are continuing to plague us, and we're just hobbling along. And these aren't new issues; these are old issues that we're just trying to put Band-Aids on a bullet hole right now. When we come to immigration right now, it's a Band-Aid right now that we're trying to. Now, yeah, the wall is one part of it, but again, it goes back to the immigration courts right now that are overflowing right now. It goes back to who are the type of immigrants that we want to let in right now. To go back to the imagery, we're the pretty girl at the prom right now. There's a lot of people that want to be with us, and a lot of people want to join us, and that's a beautiful, good thing. And we need to honor our past and to recognize that we do let certain people in. But who are the type of people that we want to let in? Because at the end of the day, we can't let in everybody. That's unrealistic for us to recognize. So we need to come up with a fair and equitable system to figure out what's an appropriate number to let in, but also who are the type of people that we want to let in. Because especially since the world is so harsh right now, and that there are legitimate cases for political asylum, and we need to hear those cases and need to have a case for that. So yes, there's Band-Aids that are on bullet holes, but hopefully 2019 will be the year that we refuse to utilize the duct tape and the Band-Aids and really begin to do the necessary work, especially in DC, but also recognize that a part of that is with us as well, to make sure that we can mend some of these things that make us a more prosperous and perfect union.
So we don't get any tears on our guitars or anything like that, right?
Exactly. I'm tired of crying on my guitar.
And let me add one more point, since we're having fun with Taylor Swift there for just a second, and that is the biggest issue that doesn't even get mentioned very often, but we try to mention it here. It's 40% of the people that are here illegally come from overstaying their visas. So that's another issue apart from all the other aspects of immigration, because we did let them in, but we wanted to send them back, and they don't want to go back. And so there just need to be some ways in which we can track those individuals, because that is almost half, not quite half, but almost half of the problem that we're dealing with in terms of illegal immigration right now.
And I think one of the if we can take any encouragement, because again, sometimes we can just paint such a bleak picture of what's happening right now. There is some great things that are happening right now that we've got to remember. ISIS used to be this looming threat that was always before us, especially for the past 3 years, since 2014 of June, when Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared that he was the caliph. But now ISIS has been greatly diminished. Are they still present? Yes, but they have been greatly diminished right now. And then another issue we can think about, how we've worked across, criminal justice reform, the First Step Act, a significantly bipartisan needed solution to a problem that's been plaguing us. Yes, that we can paint such a bleak picture of some of the problems that plague us. But what we've also seen in the recent history is that we've been able to come together and solve some of these things, because we didn't become the greatest country in the world by simply just lamenting the problems that face this world. We did something. We were Teddy Roosevelt's. We got into the arena, and lo and behold, we've come out as victors.
Well, and again, that always illustrates a point that I've made before, and that is, if you went out right now and surveyed the American people what they thought were the top 10 issues, I'm not sure criminal justice reform would be in the top 10, but it was a very important thing to do and was accomplished. Now, if you were to go out there, I suspect, Penna, we'd find a fair number of people that say building the wall is in that top 10, and that is something that we can't seem to even get an answer on. So we solved a problem of criminal justice reform and even sentencing reform in a way that was bipartisan. Can't we solve the issue of borders and immigration and some of this in a bipartisan way?
Yeah. Well, I think it has to be bipartisan, but I also think that people have to stand on principle to some degree.
Yes.
I think because part of the problem with immigration is there's been an inertia because people are not willing to stand on principle. Right now there's this kind of, this president is standing on principle, and we're all wondering and looking and seeing if that's going to work. But, it hasn't worked to go the other way. It hasn't worked to capitulate. It hasn't worked to go ahead and fund the government and leave out the border. So I think it's just worth a try right now.
Well, that's where we are. And again, it may continue all the way to the State of the Union address. If it does, we're going to be spending a lot of time.
And I know I can't believe I'm bringing this up with only 40 seconds left, but I'm going to bring it up. I just don't understand why he did it now. Like, we're about to lose the House for getting.
That's why he's doing it now.
Yeah, I was like,
he should have
last
done
opportunity.
It. Yeah, and he did say last time, I won't do it again. But he waited too long.
Yeah, it's like when we had this
Yeah.
issue 3 months ago, and it would have been the perfect time when we controlled the House and the Senate. But now we're
Didn't win affect the elections.
Yeah,
we know how that game goes.
But it just seems like if it was so important, then maybe it was worth affecting the elections. That inevitably it was a push for us because we didn't lose as many Senate seats as we thought we were going to lose, but we did win. We did lose quite a bit more House seats than we thought, but nevertheless.
Yep. That is one of those questions that I would love to have a biographer figure out why he didn't do that years ago. But we got to take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Ben Franklin reportedly said, "There is nothing certain in life except for death and taxes." Well, in a 548-page complaint, one man has targeted at least one of those certainties, and it's not death. Terry Lee Hines contends that the United States tax code has violated the Constitution by establishing taxism and institutionalized faith and religion. Because the tax code has the effect of favoring and even promoting organized religions through tax breaks and other benefits, Mr. Hines believes the tax code is in violation of the First Amendment. Well, I suppose this is the sort of case that law students are forced to grapple with, but actually have little effect in the real world. Some may dream that such a lawsuit is the silver bullet to bring down our ghoulish tax system. Alas, Mr. Hines' lawsuit will not free us from the taxman's visit every April 15. For one reason, taxpayers have a lot of hurdles to overcome just to bring the lawsuit. Mere allegations, even ones dressed up in the garb of a First Amendment challenge, that they do not like to pay taxes will not be sufficient. For now, Mr. Hines and the rest of us will have to continue to pay our taxes, and most importantly, the religious charities and houses of worship that are exempt from them will continue to be exempt. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. You can protect your religious freedom by going to firstliberty.org to download your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit. Our attorneys created kits for churches, ministries, Christian schools, military members, students, and teachers, and the workplace. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for just a few more minutes, and Penna, Dexter, and Dr. Nick Pitts in studio with us. Again, just to give you a little bit of a program note, on Wednesday, Millennial Roundtable, and that's going to be a great opportunity. Of course, we'll have our Friday weekend edition and all sorts of things that we'll be talking about in the new year of 2019. But just before we finish off the day, Penna, you've got a couple of notes here, or some things that maybe we should address as we look back over the year 2018. What would you add to the mix here?
Well, I'm thinking, like right now here at the end of the program, I'm thinking forward a little bit to the threats.
Sure.
Because we've seen trends that can be somewhat disturbing. We've seen, I think today, Nick very clearly articulated the fact that we're prosperous. And so we have this freedom now to try out some really weird ideas that are hurting us, and to move forward on things like a transgender agenda. And the church isn't strong and powerful to be able to combat these types of things right now. So I think what what our mandate is here at Point of View is to build up the body of Christ, to help them with knowledge, to help them with tools, to make a difference in the culture. And so, to do that, of course, we need people to support us. So right here at the end of the program, I just kind of want to talk about if we don't get the support that we need for Point of View, this massive cultural assault from the left that's coming on our country, on our nation, on many countries, but we're talking about America right now. We need to counter that with biblical truth. And much of the church has actually become apostate, or it's weak. It doesn't understand the Word of God the way we used to catechize people. And so that's what you're about here at Point of View, Kerby. You bring in people that can actually bring truth to the microphone to help people undergird their political positions with biblical values. And if we don't have the funding to be able to do that, I mean, we've got to keep our equipment up. We have to be able to broadcast. We have to be able to pay the very lean staff that we have here. If we don't have that funding, we won't be able to do those things. And so, I'm not trying to be alarmist here. I'm just trying to say, business-wise, we need our supporters to step up. And here at the end of the year is a very important time to do that.
You talked about the lean staff. Somebody said the other day you should remind everybody that you don't have very many people. And I can, give you the number, but the better way to illustrate it is next to us here we have a little table, a conference table. We all sit around the table. That's all there is.
The whole staff.
That's it. It's not like this massive organization. If people say, I really appreciate the people that are doing research for you. You're looking at them. I'm doing my own research.
Well,
all of us
hosts do their own research,
Yeah,
and I think
of
that's
course.
kind of one of our strengths.
Yeah.
Because then, you're speaking from your own knowledge and your own heart. So I think that's a strength.
Yeah, we're wrestling like Jacob, right? So like one of the things I'm always captivated by is like a Jacob wrestling in the middle of the night with God and then walking away with a limp and walking away blessed. And I think that's one of the things I so appreciate about Kerby is that he's wrestled with the raw primary material in such a way that he's changed by it. And changed by it because it creates a confidence and creates a conviction within Kerby to articulate the truth, but there's also the compassion for the other side to recognize that they do want what's best, but sometimes what's best isn't what's right. And so to be able to have such a compassionate perspective, which I think is such a differentiating factor from Point of View. Point of View is not like the cable news. It's not like what you would see on mainstream media where it's just shouting and it's just and it really is just very partisan, and it very much is just a sense of this animosity that comes from it. Really, what other place can you have just an open forum for ideas in such a way you can think about certain things in a way that's nuanced, but it's particularly Christian, distinctively Christian, that I'm just so grateful for.
Well, and again, I'm grateful for you. I sometimes just say, where does this guy get all this information, And so that is fun. But again, there's a humility, even when Marlon Maddox used to sit at this table, that there was always the idea that we want to give people an opportunity. I remember when Penna first started working at Point of View, and he said, she's going to be the woman's reporter. And very quickly she realized everything's a woman's issue, And I remember, Nick, when we brought you in here as well, we just say, there's no assumption that the person sitting in this chair has all the knowledge. We bring you an opportunity to hear from the best and the brightest all the time.
Yeah, and it's a sense that the individual that asks the questions holds the power in the conversation. And one of the things I so appreciate about this table is that it allows us the opportunities just to ask questions and to recognize that as Christians, we don't have to be anti-intellectual in nature. We can be open and receptive towards wherever the truth we might find it, to recognize that all truth is God's truth. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Point of View is it opens a place for a variety of different point of views, but does so in a way that's compassionate, it's considerate, that sticks to truth, but does so with grace.
I think one thing that we have is a reputation that's allowed us to be carried by stations across the country for the full 2 hours. I mean, that's a pretty unusual thing for a non-commercial radio show that's not supported by corporations, that we have 2 hours to unpack ideas. Sometimes, we actually find ourselves that we were perhaps wrong on something. So we can flesh out, okay, what was wrong with that position? How can that be changed and nuanced to apply and even updated? Because times are different than they were when this show started, or when back in the 90s when I came here and worked full time. Now I just get to contribute here and there, and I so appreciate that opportunity. But I can also look at it as a listener and an outsider and say that the time that we have is such a privilege. And, that's something that would be at risk if we didn't receive the funding that we need to receive on a monthly basis, weekly basis. But here at the end of the year, it's very important.
You mentioned one other thing I just thought I'd pick up before we talk about the last opportunity for people to give, and that is the need for us to have good teaching. Today, of course, we spent a fair amount of time talking about some of the political issues, and that's kind of in the news, but we do teach theology, we teach worldview, we teach apologetics. I oftentimes say that we really want you to be able to articulate a biblical worldview, but also know how to defend it. And I think over the last even few months, whether it is Lee Strobel or J. Warner Wallace or Sean McDowell or Josh McDowell or Norm Geisler, or all sorts of individuals that have helped us know how to defend our faith, which is going to be really important, and also just how to begin to think biblically about some of these issues. And as I look forward to 2019, I see a couple of the book interviews we've got scheduled so that, again, we recognize that we as Christians need to think biblically. And sometimes we aren't even given the opportunity in our spheres of influence to hear from people that are teaching us how to think biblically about every area of life.
Yeah, that's the richness, I think, of point of view. We're able to bring those people. Also, I think just to add one pillar, our families and educating the next generation and, teaching our children. That's a big part of what we bring also to the microphones here.
I would certainly agree. Just about out of time. So one more ask, and it is an obvious one, and that is that we certainly do depend upon your financial support. Penna, thank you for reminding everybody what they probably already know, and that is there's no corporations. There's no Corporation for Public Broadcasting. There's no NPR. There's no major Fortune 500 company supporting this. It's just individual donors. And if you have never given to Point of View before, can I ask you to just maybe think about going to the website, pointofview.net, clicking on that button? Even a small gift would be greatly appreciated. It's your vote of confidence for what we are saying and doing here. If you find yourself saying, well, I'd kind of like to talk to someone, I could put on my credit card and I really don't have access to a computer right now, that number is 800-347-5151. Even though we're going off the air, we'll still take some phone calls at 800-347-5151. If some of you are like us old fogies around the table and you'd rather write a check, make it out to Point of View, send it to Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Again, Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. If you get it in the mail today, that will do it as well. And first of all, Penna, I just want to thank you for being such a good friend, for being a co-host and a guest host all these years. So thank you for joining us on the round table.
I love it.
And Nick
Happy New Year.
Pitts, I can't wait to have you put in this seat. I get to sit in that seat. And thank you for being a part of it as well.
I am exceedingly grateful.
And we also want to thank our Philadelphia Eagles fan. That would be Andrew. And
let's not go too far now. Let's not go too far.
For their work behind the scenes. We'll be on the air in about an hour. See you then.
Once upon a time, a banker made an offer. For every mortgage payment you make today, we will credit your account for 2. If you received that offer, would you make a payment? I know I would. I'd find a way to make more than 1. Opportunities that good don't come along often, and you need to jump on them when they do. Like most stories that begin once upon a time, that one never happened. But I do know of a real opportunity to double your investment when you give today. You care about this country. You try to love your neighbors. And when you invest in Point of View Radio today, you help bring about the kind of changes you want to see in this land. And thanks to an offer not from a banker, but from special friends of Point of View, your investment today, whatever you can do, will be doubled. But you must give today. Invest online at pointofview.net or by phone, 800-347-5151. The opportunity is here. Make your next bold move right now. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Give today. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the